Angels and Demons is a platformer RPG rhythm game, but it's about to become much different. I asked my Discord to send their ideas for the game, and the prompt was pretty simple. Submit an idea that you want to see in the game. It can be serious or troll. I'll implement the idea and show it off, and if it's good, maybe it makes it into the final game. So the first idea I'll be implementing comes from Comic Cat, who suggests Angels and Demons, but you can capture the demons and bosses. Then, you can use them as an attack. All playable characters are significantly weaker to encourage this gimmick, so it's basically Pokemon in Angels and Demons. Pepper troll me. Alright, so let's start this off. I think our resident Pokemon trainer should be Kaguya, so let's make her significantly weaker. Next, let's add in some assets. We'll need a Pokeball, Pokeball throw sound, and a few specific UI things. With our new Pokeball, let's make it a functional item, and make its function do Pokeball related things. Next up, we're going to add a trainer NPC and give him a funny message. When we walk in front of him, he'll trigger a battle with us. Now, let's see how it looks in game. It's time for Pokemon Angels and Pokemon Demons Edition. Kaguya has been nerfed into the dirt and is ready to catch her first Pokemon, so let's encounter this conveniently placed Glutling and see what we can do. Now with our first Pokemon, we can see its entry in the Pokédex, or enemy log, and we can now battle other trainers. Okay, so I might have cheated just a little bit. Sorry, Comic Cat. But if you guys ever want this game to actually release, I can't spend a month programming a Pokemon clone just for a YouTube video. I'm sorry. Anyways, on to our next idea. This one comes from Tutorial Terry, who suggested Angels and Demons, but Pizza Face is always following you. Commence a lap 3 everywhere. So I'm gonna knock the always off from this idea and instead add this into the game's already existing escape sequences. After defeating a secret boss, you'll have to quickly escape the area you're in before the dimension crumbles. Kinda similar to Pizza Tower already, so we can build off of that. So the first thing I'm gonna do is create an escape sequence to test our Pizza Face. We'll throw in a cheese pizza item that will trigger an escape sequence. And this escape will begin in the final area of Chapter 1, and we'll have to make it all the way to the very first area. So let's add our escape portal into the chapter's first room. Next up, let's throw in some assets. We'll need Pizza Face, of course, and his signature laugh. Now I need to give Pizza Face his logic. When he spawns, he'll slowly fade in, and once he's faded in, he'll move towards us at a slowly increasing speed. If he touches us once, it's game over. With Pizza Face's code implemented, let's tell our escape system to spawn him anytime a room starts. And with all that done, we're ready to go. Let's see how Pizza Face works in Angels and Demons. So for our Pizza Face chase, I'm going to be playing as Kaguya, since she has the highest speed out of all the characters. Most of this run will be smooth sailing, with only a few rooms needing a special strategy to move through. So we can zip on through the cathedral, dust through the canyon, and get just past the town before we need to do anything more than just time our jumps and hold left. Once we get to this room, we spawn kind of in the top center. So we can head over to this little bonus area where you grab an extra equipable, causing him to spawn at the top right of the room instead. This gives us enough leeway to make it through and continue the escape. Getting to this room, however, is much more difficult, and you wouldn't believe how many runs have died here. We spawn in the center of the room, which leaves very little room for strategy or error. We just have to get through incredibly fast to avoid getting caught. Once we get through that oddly difficult room, it's basically smooth sailing for the rest of the desert. Just a hop, skip, and a jump, and we're home free. Now we're going to look at a set of ideas. The Dude says, Angels and Demons, but it's unfair. Still possible, just unfair. Then Tutorial Terry adds on to this saying, Angels and Demons, but every few seconds a random event happens. And Raina adds, Angels and Demons, but there's a chance that every enemy you encounter is Imp Yui. And all of these sound best put by Comic Cat, who says, Angels and Demons Chaos Edition would go hard. And I agree, so let's add a Chaos mode. Funnily enough, I was already implementing some randomizer related things to the game, so the randomly encounter Imp Yui stuff is actually already implemented. Making the game unfair is relatively easy. First, we're going to remove all jump forgiveness. Jumps must now be made perfectly with no room for error. Next, we're going to nuke the player's HP and defense. Any hit is now basically going to one-shot us. Let's also double all enemy levels. It already isn't very fair, but now it'll be even harder to defeat the enemies. And finally, we're going to remove checkpoints. When you game over, you'll restart back in the tutorial room of the mountains. Now the game seems pretty unfair, but what about chaos? Well, we have Pizza Face. Let's make him have a random chance to spawn at any given point and whenever we enter a room. We can also randomly swap the player's controls, just like the Dizzy effect does normally. Let's also add in a random chance to adjust the BPM speed, and a chance to randomly restart the room as well. And finally, it wouldn't be chaos without Tornado. A random chance that every object in the room just starts floating towards you. And basically, the game is now impossible. And because of that, it's very unlikely it makes it into the final game. So, let's just see how far we can progress. Starting from the prologue, not much is actually difficult here. There's very few objects that can be affected by Tornado, the rooms are pretty short, so Pizza Face isn't really an issue, and there's no hazards like pits, so we can't really be KO'd. So we'll just zoom through the prologue until we're at the tutorial fight, grab some extra XP so we get our first level up, and then move into Chapter 1. Arriving at the desert is where things will get a bit more dicey. Since all the enemies are much stronger now, I'm going to skip over this first enemy and go grab the first equipable item from this bonus room. The Cactus Bracelet boosts our attack, and a high attack stat is going to be crucial for this challenge. Whenever we're in battle, we'll also need to always land our smooth moves. Smooth moves are kind of like stylish moves from Paper Mario. The only difference is that it increases the XP you earn after a battle. And this scales with our level too, technically, since the higher our Moxie stat, the more XP we will get for smooth moves. It's a win-win. So the main two stats we'll ever want to increase on level up are attack and Moxie. We'll continue on, being careful not to get KO'd, despite the game's attempts to pizza face me or reverse my controls into a pit. Finally, we reach the town. We'll chase our thrall, then run back to the diner because we can't pass, get our Big Top hats and a key to the old train station, and then try and run this quest for Mayor Big Top so we can get permission to pass through the desert. Next up is the train station path. Lots of enemies and lots of pits. So again, we'll have to be super careful here. Any fights we get into, we'll grind smooth moves for XP, and then continue on. Once we make it to the train station, we'll clean it up and get into our first mini-boss fight, the Glutsling... Impui replaces the Glutslinger. Impui's level is adjusted to account for the fact that we're low level, but she's still incredibly difficult because we have to do the fight basically no hit, since every attack will almost certainly KO us. Shameless plug, but I did that in a previous video. Feel free to check it out. It was a really fun challenge. So, we'll spend a few minutes chipping away at Impui's HP before we continue onwards. Now, are you seeing the pattern I'm seeing? Because it's actually seeming like this challenge is doable. Maybe I didn't add enough difficulty to it, or maybe I'm just good at my own game. Aside from the random Impui encounter, it's kinda hard to be certain either way. But to speed things up, since this section is getting pretty lengthy, it's entirely feasible to make it all the way to the Glutank fight and to the Glutarist. So I think it's safe to assume that, in its current state, this challenge is surprisingly possible. With some modifications, namely replacing Pizza Face since I don't own that character, this mode could actually maybe make it into the final game. No promises though, because it's also very buggy. You don't get to see it in this video really, but there were a lot of game crashes. I guess that's the spirit of chaos though. Let's move into the next idea, which comes from Lime Villain. Angels and demons, but golf! So originally I was gonna just motion track some Wii Sports gameplay for funny, but then I got this crazy idea for how this could actually work. What if we make use of Yui's spirit form? You have to golf Yui through each room. Hitting an enemy will trigger a battle like normal if you're at low speeds, but otherwise it'll damage it. Hitting a door can be the hole, allowing you to advance to the next course. Or in this case, room. The game could theoretically be played from start to finish with this gimmick. So, the first thing is we're going to need to make a few assets for our protagonist. Just a simple golf stance and a swing. We don't need a ball, since we already have Yui, and her spirit form will work perfectly for this. Next up, the programming. We'll borrow some of Yui's spirit form code for this. If we touch a wall or a ceiling, we'll lose momentum and go in the opposite direction from it. Once we stop moving, we'll move to wherever Yui stopped at, and we can take our next swing. For the actual swinging, we'll implement an aim mechanism and a strength mechanism. We'll clamp these values off a bit so you can't swing straight up or down, and so you can't send Yui flying at Mach 5 speeds. The power of the swing will oscillate between weak to strong. That way there's a little bit of an element of timing to it. Can't make things too easy, you know? Now we have golf. Let's see how it plays in-game. The only modification I have to make to the main gameplay loop is that we need Yui unlocked from the beginning. So we get to meet Yui slightly earlier in the game than usual. We'll move through the movement tutorial area and make it to the dash tutorial. This room is a bit weird at first, but definitely doable with a little bit of practice. A few of these rooms require a little bit of tricky golfing to make through, like this music sync tutorial room and the one right before the tutorial fight. These together took me probably 30 minutes to make it through. Don't let this video deceive you. The rest of the prologue, however, is pretty simple to make it through, so we'll golf our way through the church and all the way to Dusty Rock. Now the real golf starts. We've made it to chapter 1, so this first room is relatively easy to get through. As a challenge, I tried to get the cactus bracelet too. Unsure if it's actually possible because I kept getting stuck here, but it could be with someone who wants to spend way more time on it than I do. Reminder, I'd already sunk maybe 45 minutes into this golf playthrough. I really didn't want to waste any more time trying to go to an item that I probably didn't need anyways. The second room of chapter 1 I thought was going to be a little tricky. No walls to stop our horizontal movement with, so we would really just have to land perfectly on one of these. Or just full send it across the gap. Once we get to the Celestial Slam tutorial room again, boy, this room is interesting all the time, huh? We can't actually use the slam in golf mode, so this room is one of the few exceptions to golf. We'll go to our standard movement state and then trigger the tutorial fight. Then we can golf our way out again. Now this next room is interesting, solely because of this opening section. It is surprisingly difficult to make it through. These semi-solids make the room much more challenging than it needs to be. It's really difficult to properly land on them or get over them. But once we eventually do make it over, we can take the item route to get up to the top ledge and then drive Yui over the wall and progress to town. Again, we'll get our hats and a key to the station, and then we're heading out again. Crossing these sand geysers towards the train station is much easier since there isn't a ceiling to hinder our vertical movement. We can just full send across all the gaps and make it to the train station. The hardest part of the whole train station quest is probably just getting Yui up the stairs to the door. Once we're inside, we'll actually fight the Glutslinger and then head back to town. We'll get our badge, and then we can progress through the rest of the desert. Again, most of the rooms here are easy to progress through. And then there's this room with the scaffolding and broken bridges. This room took me 30 whole minutes to actually make it through. I was so bought into accomplishing this challenge without skipping over any rooms that I had to do it. It drove me absolutely insane, but I did manage to make it to the door. And then just a few rooms later was this gap, followed by a Glutlery who kept body blocking me, and sand geysers which made it really hard to cross. This one took almost 20 minutes to get through before I finally made it up to the canyon. So it feels like golf is actually doable. This one could genuinely be a fun, or incredibly frustrating, addition to the base game as a gimmick mode. Maybe going a step further, there could be a counter for hits, so players could compete for who can play the least amount of Angels and Demons golf. Or maybe we give Yui the ability to dash just to kind of like hop yourself up so you don't have these 30-minute endeavors in rooms with scaffolding and broken bridges. Time for a small idea lightning round. Lime Villain suggests really big line. Lemon Smug suggests Evil Mr. Bones, not as a fighter or anything, just hanging out. And finally, the Easy Dude suggests Angels and Demons, but Goku heard you were pretty strong.